Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm one of the newbies here. So my research focuses on energy markets, specifically electricity markets and transportation markets, as well as energy justice and equity. And one of the topics that I focus on that is at the intersection of all of these things is what's referred to as energy insecurity, or sometimes energy poverty. And this is when a household might struggle to pay their energy bills, or they might face deficient energy conditions, such as not being able to turn their heat up high enough or their air conditioning at the right temperature. Now, I've measured energy insecurity through a variety of surveys and other formats over the past several years, and I'm featuring some of the results here, as well as some ongoing projects. The way that I've displayed energy insecurity on the right-hand side is the way that I've measured it in survey work. First, whether a household struggles to pay their energy bill. Second, whether they receive a notice for disconnection. And third, whether the household is disconnected due to non-payment of their utility bills. The reason that it's in a cycle is that one of the leading indicators that we've found empirically to explain how a household is disconnected is that they have been disconnected previously. So once a household enters the cycle of energy insecurity, it becomes very difficult to get out. Now, survey work gives us some information about energy insecurity, but there's a lot of actual information that we think is missing and is very needed. And so I set out with the team to construct a utility disconnection dashboard. And this dashboard is now live, and it features all data from all utilities that actually gather information on utility disconnections. And you can track disconnections by place, by state, by utility, and by year. And what we find is that for only 332 reporting utilities, which had reports from last year, that there are almost 3 million utility disconnections in the past year. So a very high number. Now, which factors correlate with energy insecurity? What we find is that certain households are far more likely to be disconnected than others. In particular, households with inefficient housing conditions. They might have holes in the walls, for example, broken HVAC systems or broken refrigerators. Second, we find that when somebody resides in the house who relies on electricity for an electronic medical device for their lives, they are far more likely to be disconnected from their service provider. And finally, we find that certain social demographic characteristics matter significantly. First, the lowest income households are the most likely to be energy insecure. Second, households with young children under the age of 5 are far more likely, by a factor of 3, to be disconnected than are households without young children. And households of color are significantly more likely to be disconnected than are white households, by a factor of 3 for Black households and by a factor of 4 for Hispanic households. Now, as part of our work, we've also looked at coping strategies. That is, how do households cope when they're facing these very extreme conditions, when they can't turn their heat or their air conditioning on? What do they do, is the question that we've asked through survey work. And what we find is, I would say, threefold here. And let me point out that this is of a representative sample of low-income households, those within 200% of the federal poverty line. We find that over half of all low-income households use at least one form of a coping strategy. And we find that the majority of them use several all at once. And we find that the most commonly used coping strategies are also the most dangerous. So here you can see that 27% of all low-income households across the United States accrue debt on a regular basis because they can't pay their energy bills. About a quarter also use some kind of risky temperature behavior. And by this, I mean you might flare your stove, for example, to warm your space. You might open your oven to warm your space. You might put you might burn trash within your home, for example, to warm your bodies. About 17% forego expenses on things like food or medical care. Now, those are all the dark bars. The least common are the light bars, and these are the things that are also the least risky, including seeking out government assistance, such as through the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program. Only 11% of households are calling the utility and asking for help, or calling a friend and asking for help. Now, one of the things that I'm really interested in my work is preventative solutions to energy insecurity. Recall in the first slide that I told you that energy insecurity for most households is a cycle, right? Once you enter that cycle, it is very difficult to get out. And so here I'm giving you the linear version of this same idea. And down here, I'm giving you some policy prescriptions. So in my work, I focus on all of these different policies in different projects and different papers, including thinking about debt relief, thinking about better disconnection protections, particularly as climate change makes our climate much worse, and these protections don't protect at the times when people need them, when there's extreme weather, such as cyclones, thinking about bill assistance. And then here I'm going to focus specifically on the box on the left. And these are what I call the preventative solutions. These are things that can help a household ever enter into the state of energy insecurity. And so here I have two ongoing projects. The first is looking at residential solar and whether low-income households having access to residential solar actually decreases their incidence of energy insecurity. Does it lead them to be able to pay their energy bills more often? Does it lead them to avoid utility disconnections? And the second project is one that we just kicked off. It's right off the ground. It's in the city of Cincinnati. It's a randomized control experiment within the city where we're installing weatherization and electrification in low-income multifamily housing units. And we are looking both pre and post to these treatments as to how the lived experience within these households change and as to how the incidence of energy insecurity may or may not change as a result of weatherization and electrification. Thank you.